Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Um, Hello.
Good to go.
Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order. City of New Haven Meeting Agenda Community Development Committee, Monday, September 30th, 2024, 6 p.m., Board of Alder's Chamber. Meeting can be viewed on Board of Alder's YouTube. Board of Alder's New Haven notice. The community development will meet in person at 6 p.m. on Monday, September 30th in the Board of Alder's Chambers located at 165 Church Street, New Haven, second floor, to hear and act upon the following. LM 2024-0564, resolution of the New Haven Board of Alders authorizing the city to apply for and accept a pathways to removing obstacles to the housing, pro-housing grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, not to exceed $7 million to support the development and preservation of affordable housing citywide. This item is on file and available for public inspection in the Office of Legislative Services, 165 Church Street, New Haven, per order Honorable Carmen Rodriguez, Chair attests Honorable Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need an accessibility-related accommodation, please contact 203-946-7651 voice or 203-946-8582 TTY in accordance with the City of New Haven COVID-19 guidelines. Masks are now optional. Public may send comments to public testimony at newhavenct.gov. As we begin this meeting, I am Carmen Rodriguez, Ward 6 Alder. I'd ask my colleagues to the right to introduce themselves.
Frank Redenti, Ward 15.
Kimberly Edwards, Ward 19.
Frank Douglas, Vice Chair, Ward 2.
Brian Wingate, Beaver Hills, Ward 29.
Angel Hubbard, Ward 3.
Thank you. At this time, I will ask the makers of this item to come forward and present. And as you come to the table, we ask that you give your name and address for the record. Good evening.
Good evening. Kathy Schroeder, Deputy Director, Administrative Services, Economic Development, 170 Borman Road, East Haven, Connecticut, 06512.
Good evening, Laura Brown, Director of the City Plan Department. My address is 262 West Rock Avenue in New Haven.
Good evening. Good evening. Malachi Bridges, address 200 Foxen Hill Road, New Haven, Connecticut, 06513.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Ready to begin? Yes. Floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about this opportunity tonight. We have spent the last month or so preparing for this evening's presentation in the form of the development of a grant proposal called the Pro Housing Initiative. And this is an opportunity that's offered through HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development. You are probably familiar with a number of other HUD grants that the city has applied for and has been successful in, having funded through HUD, we have a lot of HUD-funded programs. This is a new opportunity. This is actually the second year that this notice of funding opportunity has been made available. And it's different from other HUD grant and funding opportunities because it was created in partnership with the National Association of Planners. And it's based on feedback from planning departments around the country that had communicated to HUD that there were lots of local barriers at the municipal level to housing creation that were slowing down housing creation across the country. As I'm sure you're aware, the situation that we're facing in New Haven in terms of our housing crisis, both in terms of affordability and availability, is not unique to New Haven. This is happening everywhere. And so one of the things that HUD decided to do is set aside a pot of funds specifically targeted towards undoing the regulatory barriers that are slowing down housing creation in municipalities. So it's a really unique funding opportunity. And it funds a lot of different types of things, whatever barriers may be coming up in communities. But it really has this bent toward zoning reform and undoing policy and regulatory barriers that were put in place maybe many, many years ago, decades ago, perhaps purposefully, perhaps unintentionally, resulted in barriers to housing creation. So that's the background on the grant. We had prepared for this last year. We were aware of it. It has a number of noticing requirements that we were not able to kind of meet due to the short turnaround last year. But we wanted to talk with you about the scope of the proposal tonight, and then talk about the next steps on the grant and hear your feedback on what we are hoping to apply for. So we are proposing $7 million. We're asking for $7 million for this grant. I will mention that there's no required match for this proposal, unlike some other grants. They encourage leverage, of which we have a lot, and Kathy will talk a little bit more about that. But it's an amazing opportunity for us to be able to get some projects that are in the works funded without having to provide a local match. So we have three primary buckets of work that were envisioned through this grant. One is policy and planning. So I'll talk a little bit about that because that's largely my realm. But that is also sort of the bread and butter of this notice of funding opportunity. And what we're hoping to do is to engage in a neighborhood level planning process throughout the city. And this would be a follow-up to what I'm sure you're all familiar with that is happening right now, an update to the Vision 2034 comprehensive plan. So that's a plan that we must develop every 10 years to meet state statutes. And right now we're in a really intensive public outreach phase of that plan that will come before you by May of this year, the update of that 10-year plan. Because it's a citywide plan, we are really not able to get into the detail of, the stuff that you all and your neighbors really want to talk about, which is what is this going to look like on my block? What is this like? If we're talking about more housing, higher density housing, parking, what is this going to look like at the local level? And what do we really want to see at the neighborhood level? The comprehensive plan will be broader policy measures, the overall focus of the city, the direction that we're going. And the neighborhood planning process is really intended to get at those questions of how can we make sure we do this without displacing people, without creating housing that's forcing people out inadvertently because the cost is so high. Where do we want development to happen in our neighborhoods? Where does it make most sense? And where do we not? So those are the questions that are really great questions to get at in a neighborhood planning process. They're also the neighborhood planning is also the right step to avoid displacement and gentrification, because it means that neighbors are engaged early in the process, and then we can develop policies that really align with what the neighbors want, what neighborhoods want. So the neighborhood planning process is an important piece of that. Another piece that we hope to fund through this is the update to the city's zoning ordinance. I know not everyone is a zoning expert, and you're not expected to be, but I'm sure many of you know that zoning can serve as a regulatory barrier. Zoning dictates what can be built, how big, where, how many units, what parking is required. All of these questions are addressed in the zoning ordinance, and our zoning ordinance was last updated in the early 1960s. So it doesn't really envision the kind of city we are envisioning together today. In fact, there are uses happening in our city today, like smoke shops, for instance, that were not envisioned in the zoning ordinance. So that's just one example of how outdated our ordinance is. We are working against it right now to try to accomplish what we want to as a city. And what we can do is a process to amend that will align with the comprehensive plan, the work that we're doing now, and the neighborhood's goals. So that is the intention of the zoning ordinance update. The last piece that we hope to address with the $2 million that will go to policy and planning is a review of our permitting processes. So this is internal processing, development permits, how do we accept those? How are we coordinating with other departments? There are hurdles that we are facing that are slowing things down and making it really hard to get good housing built. So we'll do a review of that, also a review of the inclusionary zoning ordinance, which some of you may be familiar with. I'm not going to review that all right now. And the accessory dwelling units ordinance to understand how effective they've been. Do we need to make any modifications to those in the next few years? So it'll just be a review and analysis that would allow us to bring informed changes before you. That was a lot. So I'm going to breathe for a moment and then turn it over to Kathy.
Hi. So the second half of that, or the second task we're going to do is rental development and homeownership development. It's pretty much mirroring what ARPA, the stuff that you gave LCI or economic development now for ARPA. So it will be investment into rental and homeownership development. It's about 4 million of the 7 would be going to that task. It would be for 80% AMI and under as the grant allows. It is based on CDBG regulations, this grant, so which we're very familiar with. And the third tranche is for, it's for cost barriers, reducing cost barriers for people to stay in rentals and or get into home ownership. So this will also go to further fund the down payment closing costs and security deposit. Right now, security deposit is up to a max of 300% FPG, which is low. It's about 60, a little over 60% AMI. This would be at 80% AMI, which is what we're used to. So it opens up the door for another group of people, which is still, they do need help. At the moment, the development portion, we have about 6 projects right now that are in that, trying to close gaps, trying to get their capital stack together. It would push that over the finish line for some of those projects. I'm not going to tell you which ones because I don't know how much funding we're going to get. And so I don't know what it would lay out to look like, but they are along their way going into the whole financing area. The security deposit, just so you, the 1 million, which would be split between security and down payment, we have done right now with the lovely ARPA money that you've given us for security deposit. 774 applications came in. We've approved completed 456 tenants have received security deposit. It's impacted 1,338 persons.
Wow.
And we still got more money to spend there, but this will open it up just a little larger to a larger group of people with more impact. Your development rental pot that you had given us in ARPA, right now, the 7.8 million, which is what was in that pot, provided 506 units. 296 of those units are 65% AMI and under. 73, 0 to 30%, 131 at 50%, 92 at 60%, 53 at 80, and 157 of the 506 are market rate. So the money, it's working. Then the homeownership part, We're getting into our 2 homeownership projects. One's on Star Winchester. That's gonna be 15 homeownership units with 4 rental. We're doing a smaller, let's see this yet. City plan hasn't seen it yet. So there'll be some duplex homeownership units together, hopefully. Up and down like we're used to building the 2-family and a single family. So it's gonna be different because there's 3 types of housing in this one project. And Grand Avenue. So those should be starting, hopefully Star Winchester by November. I think Grand a little later in December. The leverage. So with this grant, you can leverage other programs that you have, which basically says that, you're gonna give us this money and we're gonna run the programs we're already running. So it allows us to use that as leverage. So the 8 million is made up of down payment that we fund, that you guys nicely fund us every year in home and other capital funding. So you run that, and then there's the energy efficiency program and the elderly program. It also allows you to leverage operating. So that's the staff that runs those programs. That's what the 8 million is for. So technically, when HUD looks at this, it's a $15 million project. We're asking for 7 million. So that we can make our further impact.
And just to kind of sum it up in the end, thank you. I'm kind of loud, but just to kind of sum it up in the end. So when we think about barriers to housing that we're seeing in the city, we're thinking about affordability crisis. It's due to a lack of production, as Laura mentioned earlier. So when you think about ways to kind of combat this lack of production, this inability to build at the demand that we see, which is evidenced by our vacancy rate, which is very low, which is why Haven is so attractive to private investment and development. But when we think about why we need more, or why the affordability crisis is here, what we're really trying to do with this grant is attack 3 different ways of trying to combat this issue. So the first, as Laura mentioned, is through regulatory means, of course. So that's your zoning, that's your planning, hearing the voices of the community, the alders, how we all can work together to kind of combat this issue. And then secondly, of course, is direct investment into actual units. So actually getting units through the finish line to get those units out of the pipeline. And thirdly is direct investments to actual residents, the actual people who will occupy those spaces. So, so that's kind of how we kind of want you to think about it.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I do want to mention as we wrap up is just where we are at in the process. So this has been submitted as a request to apply. One of the requirements of this notice of funding opportunity is that we make the application available to the public for 15 days for comment, and that we have a public hearing of the entity that is applying, which is the Board of Alders. And this meeting serves as the public hearing. We have also posted this on Friday. The draft application was posted, which is the application that is before you tonight. And so it is open to the public, to all of you, to your constituents, to provide feedback on that application. And then we will take that feedback, compile it, make it available to HUD, and make changes to the application to make it better. So we will be submitting on the 15th of October, but would appreciate any comment that you have either tonight or afterward. Should you wish to take the application home and read through it and mark it up, we'd be happy to review that and continue to make comment. So this is the team that's largely working on the application. As you can see, we are working across departments, and we're really, I feel like, set up for success if HUD funds us. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss this with you tonight.
Thank you.
I'll start with a question.
Alder Douglas?
Thank you for that response as far as the barriers, because I was going to ask, some of the examples with barriers, but you did point those out. I appreciate that. Something that bothers me about opportunities, and not trying to be selfish or sound selfish, but will these funds uh, be able to be used by city employees, homeowners, or already existing homeowners?
Do you mean the funding programs, like would they be
So
available to
once you
city?
get it in place, and I guess whatever you're gonna be using the money for. Home improvements, am I on the right track here?
Well, most of the development money is gonna be to rental and homeownership development.
Rental home ownership,
Right, so we're gonna develop new units of homeownership.
and that's what the funds are gonna be for, basically.
Correct, and then the third task C, they will be used for the down payment and security deposit.
So it's basically for home ownership, new home ownership.
Exactly,
Mhm.
and for people that are looking for a security deposit to get into a new unit or an old unit that they wanna move into.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Gay?
Thank you all for your presentation. Sounds like y'all been working really hard on this, presentation. Thank you again. It's kind of hard though, to try to envision this and not know where it's actually going, right? So that's a challenge for me, right? To understand, like, I'm a visionary, right? I could see it, right? Right? Is there a hint, right, on where you think these opportunities will come from are going to be, right? Like you got 30 wards. You got 30 wards. You got 30 personalities to try to to try to how should I say it, to try to put together, right? I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us. At the same time, it just is challenging for me to like not know where it's going. Like there's a lot of buckets here, right? Like there's a lot of buckets that you got to go through, right, to get this stuff done. And I'm totally convinced that you will get it done. The question is for me, where are we going? Where are we going?
Where are we going
With these opportunities of new affordabilities, new housing, new breakdown, because she made mention of the smoke shops, right? But those smoke shops are already in structures, right? They didn't have to build a new structure for those smoke shops. They just go into structures that's already there. With this particular grant, this program, I had the opportunity to honestly build, right? 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 And like, I think it's wonderful. We need it, right? It's hard for me to envision. Well, I shouldn't say it's not hard for me to envision. I would like to know, and like, what, and maybe not there yet. I know that you said that you can't speak to it, right? Because of the zone and all that kind of stuff. And we can fix that. We can fix that out too. We can figure that out. I would just like to know, where do you want to start this project? If you can even ask that question.
I'm trying to, thinking.
I know
It's
you
my
are.
thinking phase.
And as we should.
I wonder if it'd be worth discussing a little bit what the criteria might be for like a project to come to fruition, or if you're talking specifically about the housing development projects, which it sounds like, I mean, those are the
Yes.
things that are going to have a location somewhere.
That's right.
And they haven't been identified yet, but, I would imagine there's a whole host of economic circumstances, partnerships that have to be in place to make that
Unit
feasible.
mixture.
Right.
Regulatory requirements, there's a whole slew of things. Can I tell you what neighborhood they're gonna land in at this moment? Alderman Gay, no.
I tried.
I know.
I tried.
But if we do get awarded and it comes down to that, we will let you know when we do.
Okay.
How's that?
I appreciate you.
Okay.
And really, honestly, as I go through the process, and I know that y'all taking information and interest around this, once we get there, reach back out to us so we can know where this is going.
Absolutely.
All set, Alderman Pate?
I believe so.
Thank you. Alder Edwards?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question. When we talk about the meetings and when we get down to community levels and getting input and workshopping, out of this pool of money, we're not looking for, let me rephrase that. My question is, we're not using $1 million out of $7 million, I'm just putting any number out there, to facilitate those items, are we?
So you
Like
want
for
to
overhead.
overhead project delivery costs.
Exactly.
Like, what would be the items that you were thinking of, like staffing or?
Yes, to do the workshops, and when you're getting down to the neighborhood levels, you know how we often sometimes will do what we call a little grant for, I can't get my words right. We'll have
Like
a feasibility
implementation.
study. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We're not getting into feasibility studies, correct? We're just nitty gritty using this funding for its intended purpose, not putting $1 million aside or 500,000
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah,
To do these
feasibility
workshops.
studies are not part of what we're proposing.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The money for the development, because I can only speak.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For development and the security deposit and down payment, that's going to the people. There's no salaries in this because we're already using the same staff that's been doing it for 28 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Benton?
Do you want to speak to yours?
I just want to quickly follow up and say, we would intend to engage some consultant support for the planning and zoning components, if that's, I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but that we would likely need that kind of support, and that's what we would use a portion of the $2 million for.
Okay.
Technical support.
To rewrite your zoning, right?
Yes.
That's a big lift.
It's a huge lift.
My question is, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is simple. I heard Grand Avenue. I was just curious which project that was. Did I hear Grand Avenue? I heard
Grand
Star.
Avenue is a homeownership project that we're funding through ARPA.
Is that the brownstones? Okay, and that's gonna start in December.
We're hoping-
You know, Fairhaveners, we love when our neighborhoods are talked about. We have the great Malachi at the table. We're a big fan of Malachi and Fairhaven, so.
Stop making me laugh.
Listen, don't get me started in
We're
here.
looking to
Thank
see
you.
if that
Okay,
goes-
thank you, Alderman Benton. So I'm gonna follow up, regarding my vice chair's question, because it is put here, and so when you talked about making sure that homeowners stay in place, and they're not squeezed out of their homes, and we don't have this gentrification. What I'm reading here, and I think this is what my vice chair was alluding to, is this grant, this funding, will it assist homeowners and developers in building and preserving affordable housing incentives, keeping those who are having difficulty staying in their homes? Will this grant be able to assist, or is this?
Through the security
The
deposit.
security deposit allows them to get a healthy, safe, and quality home where they would have to stay in an unhealthy, they can now move because we're giving them the ability to move. They have a choice, right? But where are you looking? Because I'd really like to hone in on that. That's a comment.
Number- Yeah.
Number near.
Oh, it's in your,
It's in your, it's in the
I got
summary.
underlined there.
okay,
So I'm getting a whole different
sorry. It's in the.
understanding of that by your words. That's my question.
Or
It
just,
says it right there.
or to clarify, would that be something that then if the homeowner is having a concern and this is not what we're submitting and this is not part of this submission, will then the homeowner look for assistance through LCM?
So what I'm thinking this is for is the leverage, because don't forget, we're leveraging energy efficiency programs, elderly programs, and so that's the leverage, right? The home ownership that's in the home needs some help. And also, don't forget, that's part of the security deposits utility arrearage. So if you have a tenant that's in their apartment and they're losing their electricity because they can't afford to pay it,
Right.
then they have to
They'll
leave.
get assistance.
They'll
I
have
got
assistance. Absolutely, sorry, I didn't happen to see that.
you. Huh? You didn't see that?
I didn't see the cover memo.
Yeah.
That's
So
okay.
we're going crazy.
I was like, that's,
You're good? Thank you, Douglas.
I'm good now. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments? from any committee members?
Thank you for your detail.
Yeah, I have another question. If I may. So how will the fund, how will the? You wrote it down. So how will the grant be distributed?
Do you mean to what departments or,
Yes, just basically, who's handling this? Economic development, livable city?
I'm not livable city, I'm economic development. So it's all under economic development. It'll come in an assistance agreement from HUD, just like home and CDBG does. And Ron gives you a management budget. There'll be line items set up for the individual tasks, and then we go forth and do what we do.
to that point, I just want to add that Office of Management and Budget has been working with us as well closely on the grant, both in terms of the submission and because we work closely together on our HUD compliance. Our city plan is involved in that. Kathy is very involved in HUD compliance. So there's a number of requirements for this grant that we are very familiar with, that OMB has worked on because we work on compliance with lots of other HUD funding opportunities.
And this falls under CDBG.
Right.
Which you guys are all very familiar with.
Oh my God.
It's a lot.
Any other questions from committee members? No? Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
At this time, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? For a second time, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? For a third time, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Madam Chair, I move that we close the public portion.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. The public portion has been closed. My apologies, all those in favor?
Aye.
The public portion has been closed.
Madam Chair, I move that this item that's before us, I would like to move it.
Second.
The item has been moved in second. Discussion from the committee members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, well, I think it's all seems in order and we don't want to lose out on getting this money. So, pretty sure we will work out the details of the finalization of this whole project. Thank you.
Any further discussion, Alderman Good?
Yes, I also support this grant opportunity, and I think it's in line with what we've been trying to do for affordability in the city of New Haven. I hope at that time when it comes before us that we know where this is going and what neighborhood that it goes to, so it can be evenly distributed to these colleagues that sit on the board. So I am in favor of it. Just want to know where it's going before it goes.
Thank you, Alderman Good. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, we could take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Any opposed?
I make a move.
Okay. The item has passed.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
The item has been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Do the right thing.
Yeah, so, on YouTube, I did. You're done. You're on.